Just 30 minutes before the most important meeting of his career, a millionaire receives a devastating call. The translator specialized in Japanese has suffered an accident and cannot attend. Without knowing a single word of the language, he is about to lose a $700 million contract with the most powerful Japanese businesswoman in the country. In absolute despair, he desperately tries to use translation apps, but the technical terms come out completely distorted, causing growing confusion on the faces of the Japanese visitors. That's when the 8-year-old daughter of the cleaning lady, who usually plays in the hallways during school vacations, timidly approached the meeting room and whispered something in perfect Japanese that left everyone completely shocked. The wall clock in the sumptuous conference room at Vance Global mercilessly ticked away the dwindling minutes. The aroma of imported coffee, mingling with the crisp scent of linen bond paper, hung in the air, a futile attempt to mask the suffocating tension emanating from Elias Vance. In his early 50s, with a posture that radiated the air of a conquered kingdom, Elias was the epitome of the multi-millionaire tycoon. His name was synonymous with success. His fortune, amassed over decades of savvy Wall Street investments, seemed unshakable. Yet, at that very moment, the facade of invincibility was beginning to crumble. Elias was a mere 40 minutes away from losing the most significant contract of his life, a deal worth $700 million. This agreement wasn't just another addition to his already vast fortune. It was the lifeline for Vance Global, which found itself on the brink of bankruptcy after a series of high-risk ventures had culminated in unexpected losses. The thought that his empire, built with sweat and an almost predatory ambition, could collapse was a torment he refused to acknowledge. He had always despised anyone he considered socially inferior, convinced that success was irrefutable proof of worth. His obsession with control was the driving force of his existence. And now, the ground beneath his feet seemed to be crumbling. The meeting with the powerful Japanese businesswoman, Ms. Tanaka, of the Tokyo-based tech conglomerate, had been meticulously planned for months. Every detail, from the ambient temperature to the arrangement of the chairs, had been designed to impress. However, the most crucial element, the translator specializing in corporate Japanese and its intricate cultural protocols, was the keystone. Japanese protocol demanded linguistic and cultural perfection. A single mistake, a slip in etiquette, could turn years of negotiation to ash. Elias was counting on this, on the guarantee that everything would be impeccable. His reputation as an infallible man, a flawless strategist, depended on it. The idea of failing publicly, of being humiliated before his peers and, worse yet, having to depend on the help of others, was a slow poison to his ego. The shrill ring of his private phone shattered the tense silence of the room. With an impatient sigh, Elias answered, expecting a final confirmation, a trivial adjustment. Instead, the choked voice on the other end of the line delivered devastating news. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. A grave family emergency. My translator, Mr. Kenji, he won't be able to make it." The words echoed in the void of his mind. Elias's heart gave a painful lurch. Kenji was the only expert he trusted for this negotiation. Without him, the meeting was doomed. Panic, an unwelcome and utterly unexpected visitor, began to creep into his chest, a chilling sensation that paralyzed him. He didn't know a single word of Japanese. He hung up the phone, feeling cold sweat trickle down his temple. "Get me another translator, now!" he barked at his assistant, not even bothering to disguise the sudden fragility in his voice. His assistant, Mrs. Davies, an efficient and perpetually calm woman, recognized the urgency in her boss's voice and began making frantic calls. Time, however, was not on their side. Every passing minute was a reminder of the approaching financial precipice. Ms. Tanaka and her team would be there in less than an hour, and Elias felt control slipping through his fingers like fine sand. He, the man who had always controlled every aspect of his universe, was now at the mercy of the unknown. Mrs. Davies, after several fruitless attempts, returned, her eyes full of apology. "Mr. Vance, I've tried everyone. All the professional translators with the necessary specialization are booked. The few who are available don't have the command of the technical vocabulary for a contract of this magnitude." The news hit Elias like a physical blow. There was no plan B. His mind, always so focused on strategies and solutions, was blank. Reality, cruel and relentless, was crushing his arrogance. His dependence on someone he considered dispensable was now his ruin. What would he do? How could he save his empire? Elias stood up abruptly, pacing the room, his thoughts a dense fog of despair. The polished gleam of the mahogany table reflected the light, but he saw nothing but the abyss opening before him. It was then that a small shadow appeared at the door, a petite girl with large, curious eyes. The cleaning lady's daughter, who always accompanied her mother to work. Elias, his mind in tatters, barely noticed her. The child, however, was there, watching his every move, absorbing every word of his silent desperation. The door opened again, and Mrs. Davies, her voice low and cautious, said, "Mr. Vance, Ms. Tanaka is arriving. Her car just pulled up." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. Time was up. The sound of tires gliding on the parking lot asphalt and the hurried footsteps of Mrs. Davies brought Elias back to stark reality. Ms. Tanaka and her delegation were already on their way to the conference room. Elias felt a lump in his throat, the same feeling he'd had as a young, inexperienced investor when he made his first big play and watched his stocks plummet in a matter of hours. Now, it was his reputation, his net worth, and the future of his company on the line. He tried to compose himself, to put on the air of authority that usually intimidated everyone, but inside, it was a battlefield. The panic of being exposed, of having his emotional vulnerability laid bare, was almost unbearable. The door opened with an almost imperceptible smoothness, and Miss Tanaka entered the room, accompanied by two of her directors. She was an elegant woman, wearing a silk kimono that exuded discretion and power. Her dark eyes swept the room with subtle curiosity, but her expression remained impassive. With a polite nod, she greeted Elias, and then, to his despair, began speaking in formal Japanese, a torrent of words that sounded to him like an indecipherable tangle. Her directors, equally serious, nodded in agreement. The air in the room seemed to thin. Elias tried to force a smile, a gesture that felt horribly artificial on his tense face. His mind raced for a desperate solution. He pulled his phone from his pocket, hastily opening a translation app. Technology, which he so often praised as the pillar of his success and wealth, was now his only fragile hope. With trembling fingers, he typed a formal greeting in English, waiting for the app to work its magic. The device emitted a robotic sound, and a metallic voice uttered the words in Japanese. Ms. Tanaka, who had paused to listen, tilted her head, a slight furrow of confusion appearing between her eyebrows. Elias pressed on, trying to articulate his proposal, the complex technical terms of the $700 million contract. He spoke. The app translated with a voice that seemed to come from another world, and the expressions on the faces of the Japanese executives shifted from confusion to increasingly evident displeasure. The nuances of the language, the subtleties of etiquette that Kenji mastered so well, were completely lost in the robotic translation. Crucial phrases about profits, dividends, and cash flow were transformed into a jumble of disconnected words, meaningless in a business context. The silence that followed each translation was heavy, laden with unspoken disapproval. He felt his face grow hot, humiliation bubbling under his skin. His castle of arrogance was being assaulted at its very foundations. It was then that the small shadow reappeared. The girl, whom he had dismissed with such irritation minutes earlier, was standing near the door, watching the scene with a seriousness unusual for her age. She approached slowly, her small steps almost inaudible. Elias, immersed in his torment, barely noticed her. Ms. Tanaka, however, saw the child, a slight, almost imperceptible, easing in her rigid posture. The girl stopped a few feet from the Japanese businesswoman and, to everyone's astonishment, bowed in a deep, graceful reverence. Then, in a soft, clear voice, she uttered the words Elias would never have expected to hear from a child, let alone under these circumstances. "Konnichiwa, Tanaka-sama. It is an honor to have you in our office. May this meeting bring prosperity to both our sides." The words were spoken in flawless Japanese, not the robotic, stilted Japanese of the app, but a formal, respectful dialect, filled with a musicality only a native speaker could possess. The room fell into absolute silence. Elias felt his heart pound, not with panic, but with stunned disbelief. He looked at the girl, then at Mrs. Tanaka, the Japanese businesswoman, who until then had maintained an expression of cold courtesy. A formal smile that never reached her eyes was now smiling openly, a genuine, warm smile that completely transformed her face. She bowed slightly in return and, to Elias's bewilderment, began conversing with the child in a kind tone, entirely different from the formalism she used with him. The Japanese directors, who had seemed petrified, let out a collective sigh of relief and surprise. Elias didn't understand a word of what they were saying, but the tone, Ms. Tanaka's relaxed expression, was unmistakable. The cleaning lady's daughter, whom he had scorned moments before, was conversing fluently with astonishing naturalness. With the Japanese executive who held the fate of his empire, the contrast between his own ignorance and the unexpected competence of this girl was a slap in the face, a shock that rattled every fiber of his arrogance. The future of his $700 million business now seemed to depend on an 8-year-old child. Ms. Tanaka, still smiling at the girl, turned to Elias and, with a gesture, indicated that the child should sit next to her. The girl, with the same grace, sat in the chair to the businesswoman's right, a chair that had been designated for the official translator. Elias watched, dumbfounded, as Ms. Tanaka and the girl exchanged a few more words before the Japanese executive addressed him again. This time with an expression that seemed to indicate a new expectation. She began to speak, but Elias noticed that now her eyes were fixed on the girl, as if she expected her, not him, to unravel the mystery of her words. He knew he was in completely uncharted territory. Elias's mouth was dry, an arid desert where words refused to form. He watched Maya, the cleaning lady's young daughter, with a mixture of incredulous admiration and a pang of resentment. How was it possible that a child, whom he had barely noticed before, was saving his skin in such a spectacular fashion? His wounded pride throbbed in his chest. He, Elias Vance, the magnate who had built a fortune from nothing, who dominated boardrooms with his sharp mind, was now mute, depending on an 8-year-old girl to translate the fate of his company and his vast capital. The irony was so cruel, it bordered on the absurd. Ms. Tanaka began to speak, her voice soft but filled with expectation. She described the initial terms of the partnership, the technical requirements, and the profit projections her conglomerate expected. Elias tried to follow, his eyes fixed on Maya. The girl listened intently, her small brow furrowed in concentration. Then she turned to Elias, her large dark eyes meeting his. Ms. Tanaka expresses the importance of technological innovation and environmental sustainability in all future investments. She mentions that the terms of profitability must reflect a commitment to long-term development, not just immediate profits. Maya's voice was clear, her English impeccable, and the way she translated the nuances. The intonation of Mrs. Tanaka was remarkable. It wasn't just a literal translation, it was an interpretation of the spirit of the message. Elias felt a chill. This was far more than he would have expected from any translator, let alone a child. He forced himself to respond, to articulate his own proposals, to discuss Vance Global's assets and the potential dividends for the Japanese investors. Every sentence he uttered was promptly translated by Maya, with a fluency that impressed everyone in the room. The Japanese directors, who had previously seemed skeptical, now listened with rapt attention, their gazes shifting from Ms. Tanaka to Maya and then to Elias. It was as if the girl were the indispensable bridge between two worlds, two cultures that, without her, would be in complete disconnect. As the meeting progressed, Elias realized that Maya wasn't just translating words, she was translating intentions, feelings, and the cultural complexities that he, in his corporate arrogance, had always considered secondary to the numbers. At a crucial moment, when Elias tried to use a technical financial term that he knew was difficult to translate directly, Maya paused. She looked at Mr. Tanaka, explained something briefly in Japanese with a respectful tone, and the businesswoman nodded, clearly understanding. Then, Maya turned back to Elias. Ms. Tanaka understands the concept, but she would prefer a phrasing that emphasizes mutual collaboration rather than a one-sided advantage. In their culture, harmony is essential in business. Elias felt a strange mix of shock and recognition. He would have made a grave error if Kenji had been there, perhaps even with his assistant if she had tried to translate without the same cultural sensitivity. Time flew, and what had begun as a situation of desperation was slowly transforming into a promising negotiation. Miss Tanaka seemed increasingly at ease, sharing details about her conglomerate's ambitions, the innovations they were seeking, and how Vance Global could fit perfectly into what would be a major investment. For the first time in years, Elias felt an unexpected wave of gratitude, but his pride still fought back. He couldn't openly admit that his salvation had come from where he least expected it, from a person he had scorned. How could a man with so much money and such a vast fortune be so blind? The meeting stretched for hours, far longer than planned. When Ms. Tanaka finally stood up, there was a smile of genuine satisfaction on her face. She gave a deep bow to Elias, then turned to Maya, bowing again and speaking words of thanks in Japanese. Maya responded with the same deference. Ms. Tanaka said that the clarity and respect you demonstrated in the negotiation were impressive, Mr. Vance. She is very optimistic about the next steps. Elias felt the weight of the lie on his shoulders. He knew that you really meant Maya. As the Japanese delegation departed and Mrs. Davies escorted them out, Elias saw some of his executives passing in the hallways, casting curious, questioning glances into the room. They had seen Ms. Tanaka smiling. They had seen Maya next to him. The whispers began. The silent questions about how such an important deal, a $700 million contract, could have been so successful when the original translation team had failed. The meeting's unexpected success, driven by a child, was starting to attract unwanted attention within Vance Global itself. Elias felt a shiver. The news would spread like wildfire. What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, in a shadowy corner of the office, one of his vice presidents, a calculating smile on his face, was already hearing the first rumors, and in his mind, a sinister plan was beginning to form. The news of the successful meeting with Miss Tanaka spread through the halls of Vance Global like an uncontrollable fire, but not in the way Elias had hoped. The whispers were not of admiration for his resilience or acumen. They were of disbelief and, worse, veiled derision. A child, the cleaning lady's daughter, saving a $700 million deal, echoed in the corners, disguised as gossip but laden with malice. Elias felt the sting of the gossip, a humiliation his vast fortune and multimillionaire status had never prepared him to face. His ego, so accustomed to adulation, was raw. Among the most disturbed by this turn of events was Alexander Croft, the vice president of Vance Global. A greedy man with a perpetual smile that never reached his eyes, Alex had always coveted Elias's position. He saw himself as the true heir to the fortune and power Elias had built. For him, Elias's failure would be his ascent. The idea that a young girl, and the daughter of an immigrant at that, could be the key to saving the company was a personal insult. If Elias succeeded, Alex would lose his chance to usurp the throne. His gaze was cold, his thoughts a web of intrigue. Alex began his smear campaign subtly, planting seeds of doubt in seemingly casual conversations. Of course, the deal was closed, but were the cultural nuances really understood by a child? Isn't it possible Ms. Tanaka acted out of pity or a misunderstanding? He would insinuate to other executives, some of whom were equally envious of Elias's position. Imagine what this does to the company's image, depending on a little girl. What kind of message does that send to our shareholders, to the people who invest in us on the stock market? He would question, knowing such comments would erode confidence. Elias, for his part, tried to ignore the rumors, but it was impossible. He found himself thinking about Maya, about the spark in her eyes as she translated with such precision. His hidden emotional vulnerability was beginning to surface. He felt a gratitude that frightened him, because admitting it would mean acknowledging his own failure and worse, the superiority of someone he considered inferior. The obsession with control that defined him was being challenged by a force he couldn't master. How could he integrate Maya, or even publicly acknowledge her, without destroying the image of the unshakable man he had cultivated for so many years? One day, as Elias prepared for an internal meeting with Maya to discuss the next steps of the negotiation, Mrs. Davies approached him, a worried expression on her face. "Mr. Vance, I've been hearing some talk about Maya's mother, Akemi. It seems there are rumors about her work documentation. Nothing confirmed, of course, but..." Elias felt a chill. Akemi's family were immigrants. Documentation was a minefield. He despised such issues, always keeping his distance from any bureaucracy that didn't involve his assets. But now, the news was a blow. He knew that envious executives would use any weakness to bring him down, and the documentation of a cleaning lady, who happened to be the mother of Elias's savior, was a perfect target. If Maya's mother had immigration problems, the girl could be affected. And if the girl were affected, the $700 million contract with Ms. Tanaka, which depended on that unexpected and peculiar cultural bridge, would be in jeopardy again. The idea that his company, with all its money and wealth, could be blackmailed by something so trivial in his eyes was a repugnant thought. By the end of the week, the threat materialized. Elias received an anonymous email, but in a tone he recognized as Alex's indirect and calculating style. The email vaguely mentioned the illegality of employing individuals without proper authorization and the company's moral and legal responsibility for it. Attached was a small file, a screenshot of an immigration document with redacted data, but which he recognized as belonging to Akemi. The message was clear: continue to rely on the cleaning lady's daughter, and the mother will be reported. The family would be deported. The blackmail was explicit, and the cynicism glacial. Elias felt a rising fury, but also a deep despair. He, the man who had built an empire based on legality and the strength of his deals, was being blackmailed. He had so much money, he even kept some of it in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, yet he couldn't control this invisible threat. His enemy wasn't on the stock market, but inside his own company. Mrs. Tanaka had already shown a profound aversion to ingratitude and disrespect. If she discovered that the family saving her contract was being persecuted, the partnership would be over. Elias knew he had to act. But how? He couldn't simply ignore the threat, but he couldn't give in either. He looked out his office window, the city skyline stretching before him, the image of Maya with her seriousness and surprising wisdom invaded his thoughts. What would happen to her and to the contract? His arrogance was being corroded, replaced by a genuine concern he never expected to feel. The door to his office opened, and Alex walked in, wearing that same smile, but his eyes gleamed with a restrained satisfaction. "Mr. Vance, I heard Ms. Tanaka requested a new meeting for the coming days, a crucial step in negotiating our capital. I hope we'll have a more suitable translator this time. After all, the image of Vance Global is paramount." The tone was innocent, but the veiled threat was unmistakable. Elias felt his blood run cold. He knew he was entering a dangerous game. Alex's presence in Elias's office, with his forced politeness and calculating gaze, was like a dark cloud hanging over the already murky horizon. Elias felt the weight of the blackmail, the revulsion of having to yield to such an unscrupulous man. His fortune, his vast estate, all his money seemed powerless against this personal and insidious threat. The reputation he cherished so dearly was being manipulated in a way that left him furious and, at the same time, cornered. "Alex, Ms. Tanaka has requested Maya's presence at the upcoming meetings," Elias said, his voice firm but with a trace of tension that did not escape the vice president. He tried to maintain his composure, the facade of control, but his internal conflict was a whirlwind. The need to uphold his infallible reputation clashed with the humiliation of depending on a child and the growing guilt of not protecting her. Alex raised an eyebrow, an ironic smile playing on his lips. "Ah, yes, the little translator. An unusual approach, Mr. Vance, but don't you think for a $700 million contract, and considering our company's image on the stock market, it would be more professional to have an interpreter with proven experience? I have some contacts, people who have worked on multi-million-dollar deals, people who understand the intricacies of Japanese culture deeply, without any childish subtleties, if you catch my drift." The implication was clear. Maya was a child, incapable of handling the seriousness of business, and the proven experience Alex was offering was, in fact, a trap. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He knew Alex wasn't offering help. He was setting the stage for his own show of sabotage. The vice president wanted to take control of the negotiations, not to save the company, but to sink it and, with it, Elias's reputation. The next day, Alex's strategy became painfully evident. He called a meeting with Elias and, with the demeanor of someone solving a pressing problem, announced that he had hired 2 new translators. "They're the best in the business," to assist in the upcoming talks with Miss Tanaka. "I thought it would be prudent, Mr. Vance. After all, the responsibility is immense, and we can't leave anything to chance. Our profitability and the future of the company depend on it," he said, with a tone of false concern. Elias felt his stomach drop. He knew he couldn't refuse without arousing more suspicion and giving Alex a reason to attack him publicly for negligence. He had to concede, at least for appearance's sake. "Very well, Alex. I expect them to be as competent as promised. But Maya will remain on the team. Miss Tanaka seems to have established a connection with her, and that is a valuable asset in Japanese culture." Alex just smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He already had his pawn on the board. The meetings with the Japanese team resumed, and the presence of Alex's new translators was a constant source of tension. They were visibly less experienced than Kenji, and their lack of familiarity with the technical vocabulary and cultural nuances was glaring. Elias watched, his heart sinking, as the mistakes piled up. Terms about financial applications, investment funds, and treasury bonds were translated inaccurately, causing moments of awkward silence and puzzled looks from the Japanese team. At one point, one of the translators, a young man with an arrogant air, made a grave error when translating a proposal about the distribution of income and future interest. He interpreted a suggestion of flexibility as a rigid demand, which caused visible discomfort for Mrs. Tanaka and her directors. It was Maya who intervened, discreetly whispering something in Japanese to Ms. Tanaka. The Japanese businesswoman nodded, relieved, and Maya then turned to Elias. She said the intention was for an open dialogue about the options, not an imposition. They are seeking an agreement that benefits everyone, harmoniously. Elias felt a mix of relief and fury. Maya's intervention had saved the situation, but it had also exposed the incompetence of Alex's translators. The vice president, noticing the blunder, tried to cover it up, but Ms. Tanaka's glance at him, though brief, was one of suspicion. She had noticed the error and the attempt to conceal it. As the days went on, the mistakes from Alex's translators became more frequent. They translated terms about gold and cryptocurrencies so literally that they lost all meaning in the financial context. The vice president, with his feigned diligence, would offer to correct the interpretations, but his corrections only distorted the messages further, causing growing misunderstandings. Elias realized that Alex wasn't trying to save the situation. He was actively sabotaging the deal. He was selling confidential information to Japanese competitors, and the campaign against Maya and her mother was just part of a larger plan to destabilize the company from within, so he could take control. The man he had trusted with a part of his fortune was a traitor. The atmosphere in the meetings grew tense. Ms. Tanaka, always polite, began to show signs of impatience. Her looks toward Elias were questioning, as if seeking an explanation for the growing confusion. Maya, meanwhile, continued to be the voice of reason, the only one who could untangle the knots of miscommunication. But her presence and her undeniable competence also became a target for Alex, who saw the girl as the only barrier between him and his ultimate goal. Late one afternoon, as the Japanese team was leaving, Elias saw Alex approach Akemi, Maya's mother, who was finishing her shift. He was speaking in a low voice, and Akemi's face, usually so serene, was pale. Elias couldn't hear the conversation, but he felt a chill run down his spine. Alex was making his move. He wasn't content with sabotaging the negotiation. He was attacking the very family that, ironically, was saving Elias. The fate of Maya and her mother and the $700 million contract was hanging by a thread. Alex's conversation with Akemi left Elias with a knot in his stomach. The look of panic on Maya's mother's face was unforgettable, and Elias knew the vice president's veiled threat had materialized into something concrete. His vast fortune and all the money he possessed seemed insignificant in the face of his inability to protect a family that had now, ironically, become essential to his own future. Elias's hidden emotional vulnerability, long suppressed under layers of arrogance, began to surface, transforming into a genuine concern for the girl and her mother. The next morning, Akemi didn't show up for work. Mrs. Davies informed Elias in a tense voice that Akemi had called, saying she needed to resolve urgent personal matters. Maya didn't come either. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. The girl's absence from the next meeting with Ms. Tanaka would be catastrophic. The negotiation, already unstable due to Alex's sabotage, would completely fall apart. The $700 million contract would become a distant mirage. Elias confronted Alex in the hallway, his voice low and controlled, but his eyes burned. "Where are Akemi and Maya, Alex? What did you do?" Alex maintained his insidious smile. "Mr. Vance, I don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps Mrs. Sato is resolving her issues with immigration, no? After all, legality is a principle Vance Global has always valued, especially when it comes to our capital and our reputation on the stock market." His voice was a mix of innocence and threat. He was reveling in Elias's agony. Elias's anger simmered. He realized Alex had not only reported Akemi, but was using it to intimidate him and push Maya away. The vice president was willing to destroy the $700 million contract, the company's integrity, and a family's life to seize control. His own obsession with control was being completely challenged, and he felt trapped. Meanwhile, Ms. Tanaka, who had returned to Japan, sent an email to Elias. The message was formal, but the tone was unmistakably cold. She expressed her concern over the growing confusion in the negotiations and the lack of clarity in communications. She mentioned she was reconsidering the proposal, and that trust, a fundamental pillar in Japanese business, had been shaken. To make matters worse, she had learned through her own contacts that there was an unjust persecution of an immigrant family connected to the negotiation. Elias felt a jolt. Miss Tanaka was not just a businesswoman, she was a woman of principle. Gratitude and respect were essential values in her culture, and ingratitude was seen as a grave offense. The reputation of Vance Global and of Elias was at stake, not just the money. In his office, Elias tried to call Akemi, but the phone was off. He felt a growing desperation. The image of Maya sitting beside Mrs. Tanaka, translating with such grace and wisdom, flooded his mind. The girl had been his salvation, and now she was being threatened because of him, because of his company, because of one man's boundless ambition. The guilt was a heavy burden. He recalled a flashback, an old memory of when he, a young entrepreneur, had almost lost everything on a risky investment. He was on the brink of bankruptcy, his net worth reduced to almost nothing. It was the humility of asking an old mentor for help that saved him. A man who taught him that true value wasn't just in wealth, but in integrity. Elias had long forgotten that lesson, replacing it with a blind arrogance. Now that same lesson was being presented to him again in a cruel and painful way. As the pressure mounted, Mrs. Davies entered Elias's office, holding an envelope. "Mr. Vance, this just arrived. It's an official notice from the Department of Homeland Security." Elias took the envelope, his hands trembling. He opened it, and his eyes scanned the unforgiving words. It was a notice of a formal investigation into Mrs. Akemi Sato and her daughter, Maya, with an order to appear for a hearing soon. The reason: violation of work visa and suspicion of illegal residence. The threat of deportation was real and imminent. Elias felt his world collapse. The $700 million contract, the image of Vance Global, his own reputation, everything seemed hopelessly lost. And worst of all, it was because of his own blindness and arrogance. He looked at the notice, at the official signature, and at the fine print indicating the hearing date. It was in just 3 days. Alex, seeing the notice in Elias's hands, just smiled, a smile of victory. He had gotten what he wanted. The paper in his hands felt like it was burning, the cold words of the deportation notice echoing in Elias's mind like distant thunder. The idea that Akemi and Maya could be torn from the country, from their lives, because of a petty intrigue within his own company was a direct blow to his already shaken conscience. He, a multi-millionaire with access to vast wealth and a huge estate, felt powerless. The irony of his situation was excruciating. The same arrogance that had led him to despise Maya's family was what now prevented him from acting effectively to protect them, trapped in his own web of pride and inaction. Elias knew that Alex had planned this meticulously. The vice president didn't just want the $700 million contract for himself. He wanted Elias's public humiliation, the destruction of his legacy, and for that, he was willing to sacrifice innocent lives. The revelation that Alex was selling confidential information to Japanese competitors, which he had discovered through a few loyal contacts he still had, confirmed the depth of his betrayal. It wasn't just a power play, it was an act of complete destruction. Mrs. Davies, seeing the despair in Elias's eyes, approached cautiously. "Mr. Vance, I received a call. Ms. Tanaka has learned of Akemi and Maya's situation. She is quite upset. She said that ingratitude is an irreparable stain on business and human relations. She insists on an urgent meeting, but not with you or with Alex. She wants to speak with the family." Elias felt another blow. Ms. Tanaka was furious, and rightfully so. He had failed to protect those who had helped him. The Japanese code of honor, with its pillars of respect and gratitude, was something Elias, in his pursuit of profit and capital, had completely neglected. The possibility of losing the contract was now almost a certainty, and the scandal could shake the very foundation of his assets and liabilities, leading Vance Global to ruin. He tried to compose himself. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the window, watching the city move. His mind, once so agile at calculating interest, dividends, and stock market strategies, was now focused on Maya. He remembered a flashback, an image from years ago. His own daughter, still small, drawing in his office, her laughter filling the silence. He had been an absent father, always focused on building his wealth, always prioritizing money. Maya, with her innocence and wisdom, awakened in him a sense of responsibility he had long buried. Determined, Elias called the number Akemi had left for emergencies. After a few tries, a faint, frightened voice answered. It was Akemi. "Mr. Vance, I don't know what to do. The immigration authorities contacted us. They told us we have a hearing scheduled. We're scared, so scared." Elias felt a pang of remorse. "Akemi, listen, I'm sorry for what's happening. I was blind, I was a fool, but I'm going to help you. I promise. Where are you? I need you to come with me. Miss Tanaka wants to see you." There was silence on the other end. Akemi hesitated. "Mr. Vance, after everything, why would you help us?" "Because it's the right thing to do, Akemi," Elias replied, his voice filled with a sincerity that surprised even himself. "And because Maya is the key to everything, and because I need you. I need to fix this." It was an acknowledgement of his dependence, a confession of his fragility he never imagined he would make. The humiliation of admitting his reliance on this family to save not just the contract, but his own soul, was an unexpected turning point. Akemi, after a moment's hesitation, finally agreed to meet Elias. He sent a private car to pick them up, instructing the driver to be as discreet as possible. Elias knew Alex was monitoring his every move, and any wrong step could further compromise the situation. While waiting for Akemi and Maya, Elias began making frantic calls, not to immigration lawyers, but to his contacts in the international press. He knew the only way to combat Alex's campaign and protect the family was to shine a light on the situation. The scandal of corporate xenophobia, the persecution of immigrants, was a story that would attract media attention. It would be a huge risk for Vance Global's reputation, but he saw no other way out. When Akemi and Maya arrived, Elias greeted them personally, something he would never have done before. Akemi was visibly shaken, but Maya, though serious, had a glint of determination in her eyes. Elias looked at the girl and saw in her not just the salvation of his capital, but a mirror for his own soul. He had to act, and act fast. "Maya," Elias said, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level. "I need your help one more time, and this time it's for a battle much bigger than a $700 million contract. It's a battle for justice. Are you with me?" Maya looked at her mother, then at Elias. Her small hand touched Akimi's, and then, with surprising strength, she nodded. "Yes, Mr. Vance, I'm with you." Elias knew the turning point had come. He had gone from a man trapped in his arrogance to a defender, and he was about to risk everything, including his fortune and the reputation he had built over decades, to fight for what he finally recognized as right. The path would be difficult, but Maya's presence by his side, a beacon of hope and integrity, gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. The determination in Maya's eyes, even in the face of uncertainty and fear, ignited a flame of courage in Elias. He realized the girl was not just an exceptional translator, but a symbol of resilience, a force that he, in his bubble of wealth and power, had ignored for far too long. Maya's nod was more than a promise. It was a silent pact, an alliance that transcended the $700 million contract and delved into the depths of human dignity. Elias, the billionaire who had always prioritized profit above all else, was now willing to risk his fortune, his image, and even his company to protect a vulnerable family. He guided Akimi and Maya to a more discreet conference room, away from the prying and malicious eyes of Alex. The tension in the room was palpable, but Maya's presence, with her unusual calm, brought a strange sense of peace. Elias began to explain the situation, Alex's schemes, the threat of deportation, and Miss Tanaka's fury. Akimi listened, her eyes welling with tears, but Maya remained attentive, absorbing every word. She was not just a child, she was an astute listener. "Maya, your grandmother, Akimi's mother, she was of Japanese descent, right?" Elias asked, remembering a detail Akimi had briefly mentioned in one of their few conversations. It was a glimmer of hope, a subplot that could unveil a solution. Akimi nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Mr. Vance. My mother came to the United States as a child with my grandparents. They were from a rural area near Kyoto. She always kept the culture alive and taught Maya everything, not just the language, but the customs, the way of thinking, the values." Elias felt a wave of relief, a ray of sunshine amidst the storm. "And did she speak regional dialects? The ones that even professional translators can't fully master?" Akimi looked at Maya, a gleam of pride in her eyes. "Yes. My mother used to say they were the secrets of the heart, the words that reveal the true intention, the soul of people. She taught Maya so we could communicate with her family still living there." Maya, sensing the gravity of the moment, spoke up. "My grandmother said that every word has weight, and that dialects were like the music of the soul. She taught me to listen not just to the words, but to what was behind them." Elias was stunned. The girl not only mastered the language, but also the deepest aspects of the culture, something that went far beyond any investment in language classes or expensive training for his executives. This was a heritage, a priceless treasure that Alex, in his blindness, could never even imagine. Elias realized this was the key to Ms. Tanaka, not just fluency in Japanese, but a deep cultural understanding, Maya's ability to connect on a level that transcended formalities. This explained Ms. Tanaka's smile, her affection for the girl. Ms. Tanaka wasn't acting out of pity, but out of recognition for a genuine talent and a cultural connection that was rare and valuable. "We need to show this to Ms. Tanaka and to the world," Elias declared, his voice filled with a new determination. "We can't let Alex and his smear campaign destroy this, and we can't let the immigration authorities take you." He spent the next few hours organizing the strategy. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. He contacted his trusted lawyers, not to defend him from Alex, but to protect Akimi and Maya. He explained the situation, the blackmail, the sabotage. For the first time in a long time, Elias was being brutally honest about his failures and his dependence on others. His lawyers, accustomed to defending him in stock lawsuits and estate disputes, were surprised by their client's change of heart. Next, he contacted a renowned investigative journalist, someone he knew would not bow to political or financial pressure. Elias laid out the entire story, without omitting details about his own arrogance and Alex's schemes. The story was explosive. A billionaire who disdained immigrants now depending on a cleaning lady's daughter to save his $700 million empire, while a treacherous vice president tried to sabotage everyone. The journalist, sensing a bombshell story about corporate xenophobia and betrayal, agreed to investigate. The revelation that Alex was selling confidential information to Japanese competitors was the climax of the plot. Elias knew this information, combined with the story of Maya and her mother, would be the silver bullet to take down the vice president and, at the same time, draw the necessary attention to the immigration case. He felt strangely relieved, as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The risk was enormous, but the need for justice was even greater. The phone rang. It was Mrs. Davies. "Mr. Vance, Ms. Tanaka is on her way. She said she will not accept excuses and wishes to speak personally with Akemi and Maya." Elias looked at Akemi, whose face was pale, and then at Maya, who sat up straighter, a glint of determination in her eyes. The confrontation was about to happen. The future of Vance Global, of Akemi and Maya, and the redemption of Elias would be decided right there. Ms. Tanaka's arrival at Vance Global was like a bolt from the blue for Elias. The Japanese businesswoman, with her impeccable posture and serious countenance, emanated an aura of displeasure that Elias felt deeply. The smell of imported coffee in the conference room now seemed a bitter reminder of what was at stake, not just $700 million, but the honor and integrity he, in his unbridled ambition, had neglected. The meeting with Akemi and Maya was, he knew, a decisive test. Ms. Tanaka was not there for formality. She was there to pass judgment. Elias, surprisingly, did not try to smooth over the situation. He felt that the truth, however painful, was the only path forward. He led Ms. Tanaka to the discreet room where Akemi and Maya were waiting. Mrs. Davies, with a worried expression, remained at the door, watching the scene. The meeting was crucial, and the future of Vance Global was on the line. Ms. Tanaka entered, her eyes sweeping the room and landing on Akemi and Maya. The silence was so thick that Elias could hear his own heart pounding. He waited, apprehensive, for the businesswoman's reaction. Mrs. Tanaka then bowed in a deep and unexpected reverence to Akemi, a gesture of respect that left everyone stunned. "Akemi-san, I have heard about your family situation. I am so sorry that you and your daughter are going through this. It is a disgrace to this company and to Mr. Vance. That ingratitude and wickedness have befallen those who brought so much light and prosperity." Akemi, moved, bowed in return, and her eyes met Ms. Tanaka's, a silent communication of mutual respect. Ms. Tanaka then turned to Maya, and a gentle smile, the first Elias had seen since the confusion with Alex's translators, lit up her face. She spoke in Japanese, and Maya replied with the same fluency and respect. Elias watched, almost hypnotized. The interaction between Miss Tanaka and Maya, the girl, with her unshakable calm, explained the intricacies of her cultural heritage, the secrets of the heart her grandmother had taught her. She spoke about regional dialects, about the importance of cultural nuances in business and life, about how communication goes beyond words, touching the soul. Elias realized that Maya was not just translating, she was interpreting, explaining, building bridges. Ms. Tanaka listened intently, her eyes fixed on Maya. When the girl finished, the Japanese businesswoman turned to Elias. "Mr. Vance, this child is not just a translator. She is a bridge between cultures, a guardian of values that, apparently, some in your company seem to have forgotten. Her talent and wisdom are an invaluable asset. Ingratitude towards those who help us is a grave offense in our culture. The way your company has treated the Sato family is a stain that can hardly be erased. Her voice was firm, filled with a disappointment that Elias felt in every fiber of his being. He flinched, feeling the weight of his guilt. It was a moment of total vulnerability for him, the multi-millionaire who never allowed himself to show weakness. Miss Tanaka, there are no words that can express my regret. I was arrogant, blind, and negligent. I did not see the value where it truly lay. I allowed the ambition and malice of one of my executives to lead to the persecution of this family. But I promise you, Ms. Tanaka, that I will right this wrong. I will bring justice to Akemi and Maya, and I will save our contract, not for $700 million, but for honor. Ms. Tanaka looked at him intensely, weighing his words. Honor is something earned with actions, Mr. Vance, not just with words. Your vice president, Alexander, he tried to sabotage the negotiations. He sold confidential information to our competitors, and he was responsible for this persecution of the Sato family. Mrs. Tanaka's revelation confirmed Elias's worst fears. Alex was not just an ambitious traitor, he was a criminal. Elias felt a wave of fury mixed with a strange sense of clarity. Miss Tanaka was not just informing him, she was giving him a chance at redemption. She had investigated, she knew the truth, and by revealing it, she was empowering Elias to act. Alex's game was exposed. His plan to usurp Elias's capital and destroy his fortune was unraveling. Ms. Tanaka, I know everything, Elias said, his voice gaining strength. Alexander will be exposed, and everyone involved in this conspiracy will be held accountable. I have already contacted my lawyers and the press. This story will be made public. I will fight for justice for Akemi and Maya. Mrs. Tanaka nodded slowly, a faint smile forming on her lips. That is a good start, Mr. Vance. But true transformation begins when one looks within. Japanese culture values purity of heart, gratitude, and respect. If your company reflects these values, then we can have a lasting partnership. She turned to Maya. My little translator, your future is bright. You have a gift. At that moment, Elias's phone rang. It was the journalist he had contacted. The news of the corporate scandal and the persecution of the Sato family had leaked to the international media. The phones at Vance Global were ringing off the hook. Public pressure was beginning to build. Elias looked at Mrs. Tanaka, at Akemi and Maya. He knew the battle was just beginning, and that the publicity, though risky, was his only weapon. The fate of everyone now rested in the hands of public opinion and justice. The news of the scandal at Vance Global, initially a whisper in the hallways, exploded in the international media with the force of a tsunami. Headlines screamed about corporate xenophobia, betrayal in the C-suite, and the story of a young immigrant heroine who saved a $700 million contract. The public pressure Elias had anticipated was overwhelming, threatening not only the deal with Miss Tanaka, but all of the company's future business. The value of Vance Global's stock began to plummet, and Elias's vast fortune, once so secure in assets, seemed vulnerable. Elias felt the weight of public judgment. Former investment colleagues who once adulated him for his wealth and ability to generate profit now shunned him. His hidden emotional vulnerability was completely exposed. The image of the unshakable man he had built over decades was crumbling in the public square. But to his surprise, amidst this humiliation, he felt a strange clarity, a sense of purpose that transcended his own ego. He was fighting for Akemi and Maya, and that fight, he realized, was more important than any money or reputation. Ms. Tanaka, in a gesture of support Elias never would have expected, released an official statement. In it, She expressed her deep concern over the regrettable events at Vance Global and publicly praised the integrity and exceptional cultural talent of Maya, the girl who had been instrumental in the negotiations. Ms. Tanaka's statement, a respected voice on the global stage, not only validated Maya, but also placed additional pressure on Elias to act justly. She was giving him a chance at redemption, but the expectations were sky high. Elias knew he had to act quickly and decisively. He called an emergency meeting with Vance Global's board of directors. The room was filled with tense faces, executives who saw their capital and dividends threatened by the scandal. Alex was present, his posture arrogant, but the gleam in his eyes was one of apprehension. "Gentlemen," Elias began, his voice firm, though tinged with an unusual gravity, "Vance Global is facing the greatest crisis in its history. It is not a crisis of cash flow or profitability, but a crisis of values. One of our vice presidents, Alexander Croft, has been actively sabotaging the negotiations with Ms. Tanaka and, worse, blackmailing and persecuting an immigrant family that was helping us save the $700 million contract." A murmur of shock rippled through the room. Alex, pale, tried to interrupt. "This is absurd, Mr. Vance. Baseless accusations." "No, Alex, they are not baseless," Elias replied, his gaze fixed on the vice president. "Miss Tanaka has proof of your attempts at sabotage and your sale of confidential information to our competitors, and I have the proof of your blackmail against Mrs. Akemi Sato and her daughter, Maya. You not only tried to destroy this company, but also the lives of innocent people." Elias presented the evidence: emails, call logs, testimonies from loyal employees who had witnessed Alex's maneuvers. The room fell into absolute silence. Alex, realizing he was cornered, tried to flee but was stopped by the security guards Elias had strategically positioned. He was fired on the spot, his betrayal publicly exposed to all present. The meeting continued, and Elias, to everyone's surprise, made a public confession of his own arrogance and negligence. "I allowed my ego and my contempt for those I considered inferior to blind me. I did not value Maya's talent nor Akemi's integrity. I failed as a leader and as a human being. But this company, Vance Global, must change. We need to be a model of inclusion, respect, and justice, and I promise I will make this change my priority." He announced that the Human Resources Department, under his direct supervision, would launch a full investigation to identify and dismiss all those involved in Alex's conspiracy. Furthermore, he committed to using all of Vance Global's resources to protect Akemi and Maya from the deportation process, ensuring they had the necessary legal and financial support. He mentioned the creation of a new inclusion program for immigrant families, aimed at discovering and supporting talents that society traditionally overlooked, using the company's vast capital to build a more just future. The board of directors, shocked by Elias's audacity and sincerity, but also aware of the media pressure and the importance of the Japanese contract, approved his decisions unanimously. The crisis was still severe, but Elias had turned the tide. Later, Elias met with Akemi and Maya. Maya's mother was relieved but still worried about the immigration hearing. Elias looked at Maya, his eyes shining with a new determination. "Maya, get ready. We have a hearing with the immigration authorities soon, and after that, a final meeting with Ms. Tanaka. Your voice will be the most important one." He knew the battle for justice for Akemi and Maya was not yet over, and that the publicity, though a burden, would also be a shield. The fight was now on two fronts, the legal and the diplomatic, and on both, Maya was the key. Akemi's home, modest and cozy, contrasted sharply with the opulent luxury of Elias's office. It was a haven of simplicity, where the aroma of jasmine tea mingled with the scent of old books, a testament to Maya's passion for reading and learning. Elias was there, a somewhat out-of-place figure, but visibly more at ease than in previous days. The press campaign he had initiated had generated an avalanche of support for the Sato family, and the news of Alex's downfall and the transformation of Vance Global, now viewed with a mix of skepticism and hope, began to spread. Elias's initial humiliation had become a catalyst for a new form of justice, and the future of the $700 million contract was tied to this new narrative. The hearing with the immigration authorities was imminent, and the tension was palpable. Akemi was apprehensive, but Maya, with her unusual seriousness and maturity, tried to reassure her. Elias, with the help of his lawyers, had assembled a solid defense, exposing Alex's manipulation and the unjust persecution. He had also committed to ensuring the regularization of Akemi's documentation, using his vast capital and influence to ensure the family could remain in the country. For him, it was not just a legal matter, but one of honor, of redeeming his mistakes and restoring the dignity that had been stolen. As they reviewed the details for the hearing, Maya showed Elias an old, worn-out notebook. My grandmother used to write in here, she explained, her eyes shining. She wrote down our family stories, the dialects she learned in Japan, and how they connected to the words we use here. Elias flipped through the pages, surprised by the elegant calligraphy and delicate drawings that illustrated the texts. It was a cultural treasure, a legacy that went far beyond any fortune in gold or Bitcoin. My grandmother said that dialects were like guarded secrets, that they revealed the true essence of things. Maya continued, her voice soft. She taught me that the true meaning of gratitude in Japanese is not just saying thank you, but feeling it in your heart and reciprocating with actions. And the true meaning of respect is valuing the history and origins of each person. Elias felt a shiver. Maya's grandmother had taught her granddaughter not just the language, but a philosophy of life, a wisdom that he, with all his money and wealth, had never fully understood. The conversation continued, and Elias realized that Maya not only mastered specific regional dialects of Japan, those crucial for understanding the deeper nuances of the negotiations with Miss Tanaka, but also possessed an intuitive understanding of Japanese business ethics. Her grandmother, a descendant of Japanese immigrants to the United States, had passed on to Maya not just the language, but the cultural protocols and business etiquette that even Alex's professional translators did not possess. This unique competence, developed by translating for different Japanese families in her community, was Maya's true strength, an invaluable cultural asset. Maya, your grandmother was a very wise woman, Elias said, his heart heavy with the memory of his own daughter, with whom he had not taken the time to impart such profound teachings. He felt ashamed of his own superficiality. These secrets of the heart are exactly what Ms. Tanaka values. This is what will give us victory at the hearing and, more importantly, in the contract. He explained to Maya that the final meeting with Ms. Tanaka would not just be a discussion of financial terms and profitability. It would be a demonstration of values, of respect, and of gratitude. It would be the opportunity to show that Vance Global, under his new leadership, was not just a company driven by profit, but by ethical principles. The girl nodded, her eyes shining with an understanding that went beyond her years. The immigration hearing was a tense event. The room was filled with lawyers, immigration officials, and the investigative journalist Elias had contacted, ensuring the media was present. Elias, testifying with a sincerity that surprised everyone, took responsibility for the company's mistakes, exposed Alex's campaign, and defended Akemi and Maya with a passion he himself did not know he had. He presented the evidence of sabotage, Ms. Tanaka's testimony, and, crucially, Maya's cultural legacy, which proved her importance not only to the contract, but to the connection between the two nations. The immigration officials' decision was postponed, a step Elias considered a victory, given the gravity of the situation. It was a breathing space, valuable time to consolidate his defense and, more importantly, to prepare Maya for the final showdown with Mrs. Tanaka. The public pressure, the media coverage, and Mrs. Tanaka's intercession had opened a window, but the battle was not yet won. As they left the immigration building, Akemi and Maya were surrounded by journalists. Elias shielded them, his presence beside them a public declaration of support. He looked at Maya, who, despite her fatigue, held her head high. The girl had shown incredible strength and resilience, and Elias knew that the true climax was yet to come. The final meeting with Mrs. Tanaka, broadcast by international media, would be the stage where Maya would have to demonstrate her linguistic and cultural skills. The future of her family, the fate of the $700 million contract, and Elias's redemption depended on her performance. He felt a mix of apprehension and hope. The transformation of Vance Global was just beginning, and Maya was the star of this new chapter. The air in the Vance Global conference room was thick, charged with the anticipation of a historic event. Cameras from international networks were positioned strategically, flashes popped, and reporters whispered, their eyes fixed on the door through which the protagonists of this unusual saga would enter. Government officials, representatives of Mins, Tanaka, and the Vance Global Board of Directors occupied the front rows. Elias, visibly tense but with a new dignity in his posture, stood beside Akemi and Maya, a gesture of solidarity that would have been unthinkable a few weeks prior. The $700 million contract, once the sole focus of his existence, was now just one of many links in a chain of events that would culminate here. Ms. Tanaka entered, accompanied by her delegation, and the silence in the room deepened. Her eyes, which had once expressed disappointment, now held a mix of expectation and an almost maternal curiosity as they rested on Maya. She bowed slightly to Akemi and Maya, a sign of respect that resonated with the audience. Elias felt a shiver. This was the moment of truth. The future of Akemi and Maya, the fate of Vance Global, and his own redemption were in the hands of an 8-year-old girl. The meeting began, and Elias, taking the floor, delivered a speech that echoed through the room and around the world, broadcast live. He spared no details of his own arrogance, of Alex's sabotage, of the persecution of Akemi and Maya. He spoke of his mistakes, his blindness to diversity, and the human value that wealth and money cannot buy. I, Elias Vance, the man who built a fortune on the stock market and in investments, recognized today that the greatest wealth of a company is not in its financial assets, but in the integrity and talent of its people, he declared, his voice choked with emotion. And for a long time, I failed miserably to recognize that. He then introduced Maya. This young woman, Maya Sato, daughter of Akemi, is the one who, with her wisdom and cultural mastery, saved the most important contract for Vance Global. She is an example that talent knows no age, origin, or social status. And because of her, and because of the mistakes I made, Vance Global will undergo a radical transformation. Elias announced the creation of the Inclusion Program for immigrant families, the establishment of a Japanese cultural center within the company, and his personal promise to ensure the regularization of Akemi and Maya's documentation. I fight for them, not just for a $700 million contract, but for justice and for honor. Ms. Tanaka, with a nod, invited Maya to speak. The girl stood up, her small figure seeming enormous before so many eyes. She looked at the cameras, at the officials, at Ms. Tanaka, and finally at Elias, a discreet smile on her lips. She began to speak in Japanese, a perfect and melodic Japanese that went far beyond formal words. She spoke of the importance of families, of gratitude, and of respect, values her grandmother had taught her. Maya then began a cultural presentation, something Elias and Ms. Tanaka had planned in secret. She recited an ancient Japanese poem, a haiku about the beauty of nature and the connection between human beings, using regional dialects that only a Japanese listener with deep cultural familiarity could understand. Her voice, once soft, now carried a strength and depth that moved everyone. She explained the symbolism of each word, the nuance of each gesture, demonstrating not only linguistic fluency but also a profound understanding of Japanese business and cultural philosophy. She explained how true profitability came from collaboration, not exploitation, how wealth was measured in respect and not just profit. Ms. Tanaka's eyes glistened with tears. The Japanese representatives nodded, visibly moved. Elias watched Maya, a lump forming in his throat. This girl, whom he had belittled, was becoming the personification of dignity, wisdom, and hope. She was not just saving the contract, she was rescuing the soul of Vance Global and his own. When Maya finished, a reverent silence filled the room, followed by a thunderous round of applause. Ms. Tanaka stood up and, in Japanese, said a few words to Maya, which the girl translated into English. Ms. Tanaka said that your presentation was the most beautiful expression of respect and gratitude she has ever witnessed. She said that you have built a bridge that not even the largest investments could erect, and that, because of your wisdom, she will not only sign the contract but will make Vance Global a long-term strategic partner. Elias felt an overwhelming relief, mixed with a deep joy. The contract was saved. Vance Global was saved. But more than that, something inside him had changed forever. He looked at Maya, at the strength and grace of this girl, and realized that the true transformation was his. The emotional climax had arrived, not just with the signing of the $700 million contract, but with the profound change in his heart. The future, he knew, would be different. The signing of the $700 million contract was more than a formality. It was a symbolic act of redemption and a celebration of human connection. Amidst the flashes and applause, Elias signed the documents alongside Ms. Tanaka, but his eyes were fixed on Maya. The girl, seated between him and the Japanese businesswoman, was the true link, the living bridge between the two cultures and between Elias's arrogant past and his humble present. His vast fortune, his wealth accumulated in stocks and investments, now seemed to have a new purpose, a new direction, far from the mere pursuit of profit and material wealth. The gradual resolution of conflicts began to unfold. The immigration hearing, spurred by media pressure, Ms. Tanaka's intervention, and Elias's passionate defense resulted in the postponement of the deportation and the start of the process to regularize Akemi and Maya's documentation. Elias, true to his word, mobilized all his resources, using Vance Global's capital to ensure the family received all necessary legal and financial support. Akemi, finally free from fear, could dream of a secure future for herself and her daughter, a future she never imagined possible. Alexander and his accomplices were fired, and the internal investigation revealed the full extent of their sabotage and betrayal. The vice president, with his plan to usurp Elias's power and destroy his fortune, was reported to the authorities and faced legal proceedings for fraud and corporate espionage. Vance Global, under Elias's reformed leadership, issued a public statement apologizing for the conduct of its former executives and reaffirming its commitment to diversity and inclusion. What had once seemed like the end of Elias's empire was now a new beginning, a rebirth based on ethical and moral values. Elias, in a move that shocked many but which he knew was right, offered Akemi an executive position in international relations at Vance Global. At first, Akemi hesitated, but Elias convinced her. explaining that her knowledge of Japanese culture and her integrity would be invaluable to the company, especially in maintaining the partnership with Ms. Tanaka. "Akemi," he said, with a sincerity she never would have expected from him, "your presence here is a constant reminder that the true strength of a company lies in its people. And Maya, your daughter, is living proof of that." Akemi accepted, and her rise from cleaning lady to executive became an inspiring symbol of overcoming adversity and inclusion within Vance Global. The inclusion program for immigrant families was launched with great success. Elias personally dedicated part of his money and time to oversee the project, creating an environment where previously ignored talents could flourish. The company, which had once harbored prejudice and discrimination, was transforming into a model of cultural diversity, a beacon of hope for many seeking an opportunity. He invested in education, in language courses, and in mentoring programs, turning part of his net worth into a social investment. Elias's relationship with Maya deepened. He saw her not just as the girl who saved his empire, but as a mentor, a guide to a world of values he had forgotten. He encouraged her in her studies, providing her access to everything money could buy, but always reminding her of the importance of her cultural heritage. Maya, in turn, found a new mentor in Elias, a man who, despite his mistakes, was genuinely committed to justice and change. Elias's arc of suffering and overcoming was completing itself. The arrogance that defined him had been replaced by gratitude, contempt for cultural differences by a celebration of diversity. He had learned that true wealth was not just the capital in his bank account, but the ability to make a difference in people's lives, to build bridges, to promote justice. He had become a better man, not because of the crisis, but because of the little girl who had rescued him from himself. Ms. Tanaka kept her word. The partnership with Vance Global strengthened, based not only on the contract's numbers, but on mutual respect and renewed integrity. She became a long-term partner, not just for the financial agreements, but for the courage Elias had shown in protecting a vulnerable family and transforming his company. She saw in Vance Global a reflection of the values her own culture cherished. The lives of Elias, Akemi, Maya, and the future of Vance Global were intertwined, weaving a rich tapestry of learning and hope. The transformation was complete, and the story of a cleaning lady and her daughter, who dared to dream in a world of giants, had become an inspiration for all. The emotional resolution was evident, not just in financial success, but in the peace of mind Elias finally found. 5 weeks after that moment of panic without a translator, the conference room at Vance Global was a scene of celebration and renewed purpose. The scent of imported coffee, once mixed with tension, now exuded an atmosphere of collaboration and mutual respect. Elias Vance, the billionaire who had redefined his own meaning of wealth, watched the scene with a gleam in his eyes that reflected not only the success of his business, but the profound transformation of his soul. His fortune, once a symbol of his personal power, was now a catalyst for change and inclusion. The mahogany table, once a stage for tense discussions about capital and investments, was now adorned with flowers and small gifts. At its center, Maya, with a serene smile, was leading a new international meeting. She was not just the translator, she was the junior cultural consultant, a key part of Vance Global's new structure. Beside her, Akemi, with the dignity of her new position as an international relations executive, watched her daughter with a pride that radiated throughout the room. Her journey from cleaning lady to leader was living proof that talent and character transcend any social barrier. The meeting was with a delegation of South Korean entrepreneurs interested in a new joint investment with Vance Global and Ms. Tanaka's company. Maya, with her impeccable fluency and her command of Asian cultural nuances, navigated the complexity of the negotiations with the same grace and wisdom. she had shown with the Japanese businesswoman. She explained not only the terms of profitability and profit projections, but also the values of respect and collaboration that now guided Vance Global. What was once a tangle of technical terms and interest calculations was now a fluid and harmonious dialogue, driven by authenticity and cultural understanding. Elias felt immense gratitude for Maya. The girl who was almost deported for saving a $700 million deal had become the driving force of a new era at the company. Her linguistic skills, the deep cultural understanding her grandmother had passed down, were not just survival tools, but extraordinary gifts, capable of building bridges between cultures and transforming entire companies. She proved that true competence knows no age, origin, or social status. Vance Global, which once sought only money and unbridled growth, now celebrated diversity, inclusion, and the power of human talent in all its forms. The office, which once harbored prejudice and discrimination, had become a model of cultural diversity, a place where individual brilliance was valued and nurtured. Elias, in his moments of reflection, often thought about his own transformation. The obsession with control had been replaced by trust, arrogance by humility. He had learned that a true leader is not one who controls everything, but one who empowers and uplifts others. His net worth remained vast, but it was now used for social causes, for education programs, and to support immigrant families, a legacy that went far beyond any financial inheritance. The partnership with Ms. Tanaka thrived. The Japanese businesswoman, moved not just by the contract's numbers, but by the respect for integrity shown in protecting a vulnerable family, became an invaluable ally. She saw in Elias not just a business partner, but a friend, a man who had grown and learned from his mistakes. Mutual trust was the foundation of a relationship that promised to last for many years, generating not only profit and dividends, but a positive impact on the world. Maya, in her new role, continued to flourish. She became an inspiration to many, an example that the voice of a child, when filled with wisdom and courage, can move mountains. She saw herself as a weaver of cultures, connecting people and companies, showing that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. Her future was bright, full of possibilities, and she knew she was just beginning her journey. The story concludes with the image of Elias watching Maya in action, a soft smile on his lips. The path had been arduous, full of challenges and unexpected turns, but the reward was immeasurable. Vance Global was no longer just a corporation. It was a community, a place where humanity and ambition could coexist in harmony. The message was clear. Sometimes, saviors come in the most unlikely packages, and true competence knows no age, origin, or social status. Life, after all, is a journey of continuous learning, and the greatest wealth one can accumulate is not in dollars or euros, but in the ability to transform oneself and to touch the lives of others in a positive way.